Hi, and welcome to Experience Week. We're excited to have you with us today. This presentation is titled, How to Develop Customer Intelligence by Luke Williams. Before we jump into content, we have some quick housekeeping items. First, feel free to share this event with your colleagues, as it's not too late to register. Second, let others know you're watching by tweeting at Qualtrics with hashtag ExperienceWeek. And finally, all content from today is available on demand, so enjoy. Now for Matt to introduce the series.
This session is one of a 5-part series presented by Qualtrics CX Consulting. Each session will speak to one of the 5 core pillars of customer experience management. Each of these pillars or core competencies is critical to successfully deploy a world-class customer experience discipline that delivers optimal customer and financial outcomes. Allow me to share just a little detail into each of these sessions. The first session is titled How to Develop Culture and Leadership, and will focus on how CX program leaders can gain sponsorship, secure cross-departmental alignment, and build the framework necessary for measurement. The second session will focus on how to develop a CX management system, and will focus on how to begin capturing feedback for key relationships at key touchpoints, how to manage with role-based views, followed by how to enable case management and analytics. The third session will focus on how to develop customer intelligence. The material will center on how to approach customer research, relational measurement, segment-specific driver analysis, and cross-functional improvement. The fourth section will focus on how to develop connected employees. The material for this section will be centered on how to measure and understand the employee experience with the intention of driving action that improves engagement and optimal customer service delivery. The final session will focus on how to develop continuous innovation. The material will be centered on how to foster research innovation and methodology best practice, resulting in innovations to your organization. With that, I'll turn it over to Luke.
Thanks, Matt. Before we begin, I want to do a little bit of level setting. Customer experience is such a hot topic nowadays that we've seen a proliferation of confusing terms as a lot of new actors have entered into the space. Some from the analytics side, some from the research side, some from the fuzzy motivational speaking side. We just want to start by defining how we mean to use the term CX measurement and management in the Qualtrics context. So for us, customer experience measurement and management is the discipline of embedding customer insight into every critical decision that gets made inside an organization and improve how we perform at every level within that organization. So Qualtrics has organized its CX philosophy around what we refer to as the CX5, which is the 5 competencies for success in CX measurement and management. And what you heard on Monday covered the first pillar of the CX5, which is developing a culture of CX leadership. That pillar maps internal stakeholders and stewards of the customer experience, establishes firm-wide alignment on mission and methods, it defines and publishes CX vision and values, and it often includes elements of journey mapping. What you heard yesterday covered the second pillar of the CX5, which is establishing your operational program. And this pillar measures both customer touchpoints and journeys. And oftentimes, it's the most visible, high-volume stuff that a firm does. And in some ways, this was born out of the service quality movement, but now it's come to adopt journey analytics and omnichannel measurement, as part of its core. The third pillar of the CX5, which is our topic for today, focuses on strategic CX programs, also known as customer intelligence. This pillar establishes the mechanisms for the firm's customer intelligence program, and it also covers strategic elements of research. And the cadence for this type of work can vary significantly from ad hoc to periodic or ongoing. However, the content of the work in this pillar focuses not simply on touch points and journeys for customers, but on the entirety of relationships. So this arm of your CX program will actually help you answer bigger questions about your customers and inform significant decisions which often rely on both narrow and wide lens assessments of customers, competitors, markets, and the most effective methods for addressing each of those. So in order to do this, it's essential that we have conducting customer research as top of mind, measuring key relationships, segmenting customers and understanding drivers of both attitude and behavior, and ultimately driving cross-functional change within the organization. We begin first with the premise that you should be conducting relationship research. You know, some firms have trouble getting aligned on what types of research should be conducted, who should own that process and be responsible for the outcome. Some firms have difficulty understanding how this data can thread into existing work that's already being done from operational and strategy and marketing departments. And some firms don't have the bandwidth to really dig into anything beyond the operational streams of data that they're already getting. In any event, firms not conducting this type of measurement usually avoid it, and they end up not doing so because they aren't sufficiently compelled that they should be doing it, that they need to do it, that they have to do it. So let's discuss why it's imperative to do this type of research. Many operational programs, these transactional programs, they're oriented around the idea of quality, of detecting service failures and rectifying these service failures. And this is an important place to begin because many firms believe that the bigger the service failure, the bigger the impact. However, research has conclusively shown over and over that ordinary service failures are much more correlated to changes in customer satisfaction and market share than are catastrophic ones. Certainly there are exceptions to this model, such as when a catastrophic service failure feels quote unquote on brand or consistent with what we already think about a company. So if we want to use a recent example, and maybe an obvious one from the news in the last month, was a United Airlines incident where a passenger was forcibly and violently removed from an airplane, pretty much bottom of the barrel when it comes to customer experience options. While it's worth noting that no United employees were directly responsible for the well-known incident, it's hard to say that some affiliate employees didn't play a role in the lead-up to that incident. In any event, the public completely blamed United for this, and they accept the pinning of that blame. There was a significant outlash at United, and the media coverage on this was nonstop. It was scathing, and this incident occurred on Sunday, April 9th. The next day, before this incident was widely reported, the stock was trading around $71 a share. Within a couple of days, and that incident became really well reported, United Airlines lost $800 million worth of value in a 24-hour period, right? Stock price went way, way down. Something like a week after the incident, their stock had dropped by 5.5%, which if you're a $36, $37 billion company is a pretty big deal. But a month later, after the incident, on May 16th, the stock was actually trading up 11% versus pre-incident values. And even though flyers were claiming protest, this largely was an incident that didn't fit with any obvious narrative around United. Certainly, some customers see them as below average in terms of satisfaction, but this was entirely something separate. And this is because the way we develop notions about a brand are through something called residual memory scripts. The human brain is exceptional at recalling facts top of mind when it deems an experience to be important. However, much of what we do on a daily basis doesn't really meet that criteria. So in the short term, you store facts in a deeply branched mental architecture. So if I ask you about, say, a grocery store visit yesterday, you can probably recall it. But if I ask you about that same visit a month from now, chances are you won't be able to recall anything at all except that it was relatively unremarkable. You've ejected the facts and replaced it with a preserving emotion. So in this way, emotion can be a critical icon for customer experience. So for example, everyone has companies, right, that they do business with that they kind of wish that they didn't. It could be your cable company, it could be your wireless provider, it could be the Department of Motor Vehicles. Places like this can emote kind of a visceral reaction for customers. So if you ask customers why they hate it, they're going to give you one or two well-worn examples. And those could be service experiences, it could be advertising campaigns that they hated, it could be regular frustrations with aspects of the products or services, whatever. But if I say, okay, we're going to resolve these issues now and forever, will you be happy with the brand at that point? The answer usually is no. There's something unresolved about it. The emotion remains even after the fix occurs. This is because CX is not simply defined by touch points alone. If it were, we'd have an utterly transactional view of the world, and customer loyalty would never come into play. Marketing and branding would play a diminished role. Word of mouth would become increasingly irrelevant, and strategic decision-making would not require trade-offs for the customer. So when we talk about strategic CX and customer relationships, we are talking about an end-to-end game where experience is continually had enhanced or not enhanced, whatever the case may be, and then updated. And many companies make the mistake of only monitoring touch points via some siloed approach. However, there's a lot of learning that goes on, real learning, that comes from examining cumulative effects that exist within any customer experience. That's the collective experiences we gather, the knowledge of other people's experiences, the employees who serve you, and the products and services we use, all juxtaposed against the backdrop of competition and alternatives to those relationships. And this is kind of where the value proposition of transactional research and the value proposition of relationship research become clear and distinct by including and addressing the omnipresence of competition. So we often think about people who buy from us as our customers. And I'll actually put that in quote unquote, our customers. They're in our customer database. We can see how they shop and how they spend with us. We market to them with some degree of success, and that must mean that they like us. We've got something that they want, and that must mean that we understand them, at least to some extent. But customers don't have to spend their money with you. They can spend it anywhere. They can choose to spend it nowhere if they want to. And managing only interactions, while it's pretty convenient, fails to emphasize the basic truth that customers live their lives externally. So if there are two things we want you to take away from this first point, is that first, you don't determine who your competitors are. Your customers determine that. And the second thing is, using only a touch point view of your customers ignores the reality that customers behave externally. So we see that client intelligence can be complex. That's obvious. But why do it? Why go through the hassle of doing all this? Why not just measure touch points alongside marketing campaigns and sort of interpolate, I guess, how we're doing? And the reason is because customer intelligence feeds into strategy. And strategy is where the money is at. There's definitely money in delivering great frontline experiences. There's definitely money in operational efficiency, but there are more lucrative plays out there, longer plays, harder plays to make. So anyone who tells you that CX is a fuzzy space, we can come right back to them and tell them exactly what CX delivers on, right? Finding better ways of locating, attracting, and retaining loyal customers, enhancing share of wallet, increasing market penetration, increasing customer lifetime value, building sustainable, competitive market differentiation by building your brand to deliver effectively and easily, and doing so in a way that leaves your competition less room to move. So we've established a clear purpose and necessity to measure customer relationships separately from touchpoint and journey measurement. So let's turn our focus now for the critical ways that we can really deploy customer intelligence in pragmatic ways. So there's a myriad of different ad hoc or tracking studies that can be deployed to develop client intelligence. Some common ones are shown on the screen here, but certainly there are many more. We'll take, for example, first, customer satisfaction and loyalty studies. This is perhaps the most common form of strategic study where firms ask customers directly about overall experiences, about experience with the staff, experience with products, how they use their products, expected future behaviors with the brand. Maybe they're going to throw in some open-ended questions, something like that. These are typically branded studies that run on the client's own sample direct from their own database. Next, you get market level and competitive studies, similar to customer satisfaction and loyalty studies in many ways, except that these studies ask questions across a broad set of category behavior, a variety of competitors, and they typically acquire some comparative and relative measures. And these can sometimes take the shape of a traditional attitude and usage study and can either be branded or unbranded. It can run on client or panel sample. There's lots of ways that you can run these. But if you're studying drivers of brand consideration, if you're studying product usage, if you're studying market penetration, if you're studying the drivers of share of wallet, this is typically the type of mechanism that you're going to deploy. And these studies are typically run as trackers, and they can contain a number of variable batteries. So you can change up the content of your survey over time, and you can infuse sort of new moment-relevant questions as your brand needs them. Loyalty program studies. Loyalty and reward schemes are pretty common. right? And they're valuable, and they can be very expensive. Some of the most expensive part of some marketing budgets really come from the loyalty program, and they do it because these things can be really lucrative. A long time ago, this case study was born out of how valuable these programs can be. And if you want to be able to judge the ongoing value to the members, you want to be able to create new programs or co-create new programs with customers, these can be fantastic, and they can be used to really innovate the way that we treat customers from a loyalty perspective. Not all customers, right, are created equal. It's ridiculous to think that we want to treat all customers the same, unless you're dealing with something, for example, like mass transportation, where it doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, the train is the train, and the experience is going to be what it is. For the most part, we want to be able to segment the experiences. Certainly, we already do this in marketing, but there are clever ways nowadays that you can actually segment for the experience. So studying high-value segments ensures the firm keeps a pulse on the business, where the revenue is coming from and where the bulk of the customers lie. Similar to that are high-risk segment studies. There's a weird old saying in the retail space that all customers make us happy, some by coming, others by going. The thing about that, though, is that a firm that's operating strategically will have some degree of customer churn, but a firm should be able to decide strategically which ones they want to keep and which ones they want to shed. So studying high-risk segments allows the firm to make timely and effective moves to retain the right customers the right way and to do so profitably. Last, new or remaining segment studies. Customer landscapes can change over time, and there's a lot of examples, particularly in the retail space, where the customer landscape can shift right out from underneath your feet. So the best thing to do is to be constantly looking for and trying to identify new segments that are developing inside the marketplace, particularly brands or products that survive long enough that they're crossing over into different market cycles over decades' time, and new generations are being born and brought up through the workplace and acquire buying power, these sorts of things. You want to make sure that you're keeping really close track of all the new segments that are coming through and some of the segments that you need to retire. So just having a broad general segmentation view, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, is essential. And these are just a couple examples, these 6 types of studies. There's other types of studies that you can easily run that fit under the client intelligence banner. For example, defector studies, which can help you identify the composition of brand defectors, identifying their reasons for leaving, potential for maybe ever returning to a brand. This is a pretty common study type. Pricing sensitivity studies are really good to help you optimize value for money with customers. Sometimes we see brands giving away too much value for too little dollar in return. We also sometimes see the opposite, where brands are overcharging for the amount of value that they deliver, particularly in markets that get disrupted by competition. And the last type of study I think that I would throw into this category are value co-creation studies, which are excellent mechanisms for infusing customer feedback and behaviors into new product and new service development. This can be valuable because value co-creation mechanisms have been shown to decrease development cycle times, to increase customer take rates, increase customer satisfaction, and overall customer tenure. So really powerful stuff that can be done using client intelligence and strategic CX studies. So once you've gotten on to the right things that you want to measure and the types of studies that you want to deploy, you're going to want to start thinking about metrics in the right way. And I'm not talking here about survey design or research methods specifically, though if you want, you can see some great presentations on that from Dave Vanette or Carol Haney. What I mean here is that the complexity of metrics increases as you delve deeper into client intelligence, in part due to the complexity of sort of this loftier, more strategic goal that we set up with this type of research. So there are 3 degrees of experience analytics that you need to know and be comfortable with in order to be effective at client intelligence. And the first is vanity metrics. A vanity metric is a metric that deceivingly appears to give a definitive sense of quality all on its own. So I want to take this one slowly. The vast majority of metrics that we track on balanced scorecards are vanity metrics. So being a vanity metric isn't a bad thing. It just means that we need to have a deeper understanding of the business outcome of this metric type and understand drivers of these much more deeply. And typically, we need to know additional metrics in order to properly contextualize these metrics. So let's take NPS for one example. right? Let's say you have 100 customers. 70 are promoters, 30 are detractors. You have an NPS score of 40, okay? What happens if you lose customers? Say half your defectors defect. Half of those 30 detractors go away. What happens to your NPS score? Your NPS score goes up because we lost customers. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I have no idea. No one can know that. You can't know that without knowing more about which customers you lost and why you lost them. If we're shedding unprofitable customers, not necessarily a bad thing. If we're shedding our best and highest volume customers, this could spell real trouble. So we need to know more about these before we can deploy them. The second metric type we're looking at is something known as a performance metric. A performance metric is an outcome metric that is just directionally valid. Sounds a little bit basic, but the simplest explanation of these types of metrics is that more in that metric is definitively more and less is definitively less. So if we increase market penetration to a maximum, it's decidedly better than having lower market penetration, even if we don't explicitly know which customers we're acquiring. Right? Continuing penetration at scale will eventually create optimum opportunity. Garnering 100% share of wallet from an acquired customer is really the best that we can do. Third metric type is forensic metrics. Forensic metrics are an outcome metric that derives its value by being directly indicating or directly indicative of gains and losses. So in the CX space, you can use what's known as forensic approaches to establish, for example, root cause of service issues, but we're not referring to that. In this case, we're referring to the absolute health indicators, the ultimate outcomes we are manipulating through strategy, through tactics, through implementation and practice. And these three metric types are all valuable to client intelligence as they're inherently connected and interrelated. But when we're diagnosing the health of the business, we always come back to the forensic and performance metrics as part of our toolkit. So we're armed with a sense of the types of client intelligence research and metrics that we can have, and we want to draw attention to three techniques that are specifically valuable in designing, executing, and interpreting strategic CX. So the first technique is segmentation. It's a technique that many are familiar with, but also we see a great deal of customers who are not familiar with it. So we want to talk about segmentation. So the human brain is really effective at grouping similar things together in order to more easily understand them. So if you take a big box of crayons, right, one of those like 250 crayon boxes, and you dump it on the table, and we ask you to sort them out. And you might split them all up into just 6 or 8 or 10 different color groups. And you did this because this was the easiest way to organize that box of crayons, okay? Now I want you to go and you take your junk drawer at work, and I want you to pull it out and dump it on top of all those groupings. And as you start to re-sift through that pile, you're going to then lump all the crayons together, right? And all the paper and binder clips together, and all the pens together, and all the markers together. And why do we do that? We do it because it's easier to understand the entirety of what we're looking at, and then double-click into a single pile and understand it at a deeper, sort of a deeper level. And if we didn't do it, we'd be a lot less effective at understanding what we're looking at, or we could just misjudge what it is that we're looking at. So approach should be deployed when conducting customer intelligence research. Oftentimes, we think about statistics as a whole group behavior, right? Using averages to understand or describe our data set. So if we say that 60% of Americans back tuition-free college, we view this in totality. But if we try to activate this research, it can give us some simple outcomes such as convince more people of the merits of the system, right? And this completely misses more actionable outcomes such as identifying and activating supporters, customizing messages to those who are on the fence, defining benefits for those who are opposed. It's even going to be effective at recognizing that you shouldn't even attempt to change the minds of certain people because they just never will. They're just never going to change their minds. So don't waste your time and energy. Segmentation essentially delivers the gift of accuracy. Accuracy of product, accuracy of messaging, accuracy of service, and accuracy of experience. And there are 4 commonly used segmentation methods, right? They're listed here on the screen, and they can be used to improve the accuracy and actionability of customer intelligence research. The first one is demographic segmentation. It's probably the most common. This is information such as age or gender, income, education, region, or some kind of compound of those things, such as DINKs, right? Double income, no kids, or empty nesters. Behavioral segmentation. This is questions about things that you do. Do you work out? Do you drive to work? Do you attend live sporting events? Driver and need-based segmentation. Are you a convenience shopper? Will you go out of your way for a great deal? Are you easily influenced by friends and family? Do you prefer to be provided personal guidance when it comes to making financial decisions or whatever the case may be? So these are ways of grouping out customers. And my wife likes to say to me, you think you're completely unique, just like everybody else, right? So everybody has a sense of their individuality, but the truth is that there's millions of people who look just like you and behave just like you. And these techniques are valuable in grouping similar customers alike, making it significantly easier to identify their wants and needs, determining which segments that we're aligned to and delivering value to, how to improve marketing and advertising campaigns, the efficacy of those campaigns, and in the age of customer experience, creating customized experiences can be an effective tool to make your customers stick. Okay, so improving accuracy, efficacy, and efficiency. They're wins for you, and they're also wins for your customer. The second technique we want to share with you is key driver analysis. Also a technique familiar to many, but not well understood by many more people who may have seen the term before, but may not be fully familiar with it. So when we think of the primary application of driver analysis, people think of, for example, a system like the Bain inner loop, outer loop system. If you're familiar with that model, driver analyses allow us to define methods of making systematic changes to organizations to deliver significant value. Okay, I want to repeat that. It's designed for making systematic changes. And there are many ways of conducting driver analyses, but most contemporary methods are regression-based, and they can be linear models, they could be logit models, they could be Bayesian models, and that's usually dictated by the data that you have and how sophisticated that you need to be. But the fundamental premise of key driver analysis is that there are outcomes the firm wants to measure, but it's not sufficient to know the outcome itself. Simply measuring the outcome is not enough. We want to know what drives that outcome up or down, which things impact change the most. This essentially draws a blueprint for making effective and efficient changes to affect that outcome. So for example, these outcomes could be vanity metrics, such as how to drive customer satisfaction or net promoter score. These outcomes could be performance metrics, such as the best methods for increasing penetration into specific customer segments, for example. And the tricky thing about driver analysis is that we need to accept that it's possible that driving an outcome up and driving an outcome down, right, positive and negative outcomes, are not necessarily predicted by the same things or at the same magnitude of effect. So, for example, let's say you're running a restaurant of some kind. The best method for increasing customer delight may be increasing menu options, but the best method for decreasing customer pain is by decreasing employee inattention, right? Individually, these things couldn't scale client satisfaction up or down on their own. So, making employees so happy and attentive will only go so far if you have 2 items on the menu, right? And conversely, you're only going to gain increasing satisfaction by adding more variety, but that's only going to go so far if you can't get employees to politely take orders in a timely way. So we want to balance and optimize our input metrics such that we're strategically and effectively discovering new paths to the best outcome. And maybe you find out along the way, for example, that the best method of increasing your net promoter score 10 points is to move your employee engagement score by 3 points. So that play between the variables that we're studying is essential, and driver analysis is the best method for doing so. So build off of that concept, right, of things being driven up and things being driven down by different drivers. We want to look at also what drives metric types, because this can be critical. So essentially, what drives change in vanity metrics, such as customer satisfaction or net promoter score, likely won't be the best model for driving change in performance or forensic metrics. So drivers of customer satisfaction may produce a different order of importance than do orders of spending behavior, for example. So that understanding and differentiation is vital for decision making. Understanding what's driving happiness and what's driving behavior, it's vital. And until you connect the dots between customer experience drivers and customer behavior drivers, You might just be wasting your time and resources by focusing on things that at the end don't really matter that much. And the third and final technique we want to share today is the idea of examining market differentiation. So by market differentiation, we're referring to a class of analysis which statistically defines your relative market positioning on a variety of metrics, such as your product offering or employee quality or value for money, whatever the case may be. The outcome of this type of analysis is to rank each attribute against the market and give you a rating of being negatively differentiated, positively differentiated, or not differentiated at all, something that we refer to as white space, where no competitor essentially is winning on that particular attribute. And when you combine driver analysis with your market differentiation map, it will become very apparent, and you will quickly identify which enhancements need to be made in order to capture greater market value, and which things that you can do that look good on the surface, but may actually deliver no return value to the firm at all. Obviously, though, great analysis isn't the end game for most of you. You need to take all this stuff that we've just given you and contort it into a message, right, that supports strategic and deliberate change. So for our final few slides, I want to dedicate our time to going towards cross-functional change. And let's just call this your toolkit for change. So the first handy tool is this chart. And we know that it's going to make many of you shudder. You're going to think back to Economics 101 during your freshman year of college, and you may have failed an exam somewhere around that. But we want to make sure that you see it because it's foundational. And it's a healthy reminder of what we're talking about when we aim to create and capture value for the firm. Okay? Change in a company usually requires a strategy, like a well-thought-out strategy. So suggesting cross-functional changes in a firm not only requires you to have a strategy, but maybe even a little case of martyrdom, because cross-functional change is not an easy task. And really few people who have ever done it have come out the other side of it completely unscathed. It can be a very difficult process. So using client intelligence, right, using strategic CX is a strategy. It's not an initiative. It's not a project. It's a strategy. And this particular strategy is dead aimed at creating firm value by reducing costs, by driving out customer willingness to pay, and to do so in a competitive environment. But in order to pull off this strategy, the firm's got to be bought in. It's got to be aligned. It has to be enabled, and it has to be motivated. And in some cases, it even has to be awarded, right? And maybe sometimes motivation and award are the same thing. But it needs to be conspicuously cross-functional, because the greatest triumph stories that we've ever seen have come when companies have become a cohesive unit with a singular vision. So let's begin with what strategy is, and that's two very simple definitions. The first one is figuring out the best place to win, and really, how do I do that, right? And the second definition is how to allocate and configure scarce resources to the greatest possible outcome. So we give you our second handy tool, which is a heuristic, which helps us to win according to the first definition of strategy, where to win and how, right? To do this requires the firm to develop sustainable competitive advantage. And what you see in this slide is called the VRIN system, V-R-I-N. Each element here is progressive, and the more you progress, the more you're able to deliver on value, and the more you're able to sustain your competitive advantage. So for example, V stands for valuable, and most firms can find a way to create value for customers, because if they don't, they're not going to survive in a market for very long. R stands for rare. This is usually where the wheels begin to come off the bus for many value offerings and for many clients, because creating something rare usually requires great ideas, amazing execution, or something uncontrolled or undefined to happen sort of all at once, right? This can happen in new markets. It can happen in niche markets. It can happen in developed markets, so it's increasingly difficult to do that. And most great products and services find a way to make it to this step, and those who don't, they end up having to compete heavily and constantly. I stands for inimitable, which means it can't be copied. Sometimes this is through IP protection or something of the sort. N stands for non-substitutable, which means there's no alternative way for a customer to achieve the same value that your product or service offers. Our third handy tool is another heuristic which allows us to win according to the second definition of strategy, which is how do I deploy resources optimally? And to do this requires a firm to make trade-offs with regard to its activities. So by this we mean firms can't do anything they want. There's a limited time in a day, there's a limited number of employees, there's a limited capacity for change, and our consultants often recommend using rice grids, which is what you see here, when developing process innovations or when identifying new value offerings made discoverable through customer intelligence. So the idea is simple, essentially. If we're going to do something different and new, that new activity has to have an offset, has to have a trade-off. It's going to be of time or money or energy or some other form of resource. And we want to create a balance between what we wish to create, right, by deciding what to reduce or eliminate. And if we want to reduce an activity, we have to decide what we're going to increase or create in order to fill that spare capacity. When it comes to customer experience, there is a burning desire to do everything that we can at any moment, all the time, and in any way possible. And it's simply not achievable. You have to optimize how you approach customer experience. And this could be an extremely handy tool to keep in mind as you start to go through that process of creating new products and services or enhancing existing products and services. Our fifth and final handy tool is this, the core components of helping a business thrive through strategic CX and customer intelligence. So the first component is having a programmable technology layer. Programmable technology sort of form fits to the needs of a firm and creates multiple upon multiples of leverage as a force multiplier. So let's take, for example, the case of Salesforce, right? Salesforce, this created a time and manpower advantage for firms. It was allowing teams to spend more time taking care of customers than it was having to, go through managing and aligning and sharing customer records and all that kind of stuff. If we use the case of Qualtrics, for example, this creates a similar advantage by expediting research, making it more intuitive and automatic and robust and shareable. And even advanced analytics nowadays are becoming executed through AI and machine learning. The outcome of this, of course, is that you end up spending more time on your customers. You spend more time thinking and acting strategically and creating advantages for your firm at a rate faster than your competitors can. And in the end, the more we can transform firms to achieve better, more differentiated experiences, as evidenced in part by financial and business metrics, that is the essence of pillar number 3, strategic CX and customer intelligence. And our fifth and handy tool is this, the core components of helping a business thrive through strategic CX and customer intelligence. And the first component is having a programmable technology layer. Programmable technology form fits to the needs of a firm and creates multiple upon multiples of leverage as a force multiplier. So in the case of Salesforce, let's take that as an example. What Salesforce essentially did is it created a time and a manpower advantage for the firms that were using it. It was allowing teams to spend more time taking care of customers and less time managing or aligning or sharing all the customer records. Everything became centralized. Everything became conveniently manipulable by multiple teams. So in the case of Qualtrics, for example, what we try to do is create a similar advantage by expediting research, making it more intuitive, automatic, robust, more shareable. Even the advanced analytics that we have now are being executed through AI and machine learning, and we want to make that much more intuitive, much more plain language, plain spoken. And the outcome of all that, of course, is that you spend a whole lot less time managing your programs and trying to work through specific workflows, and you spend more time on your customers, spending more time thinking about your customers and acting strategically and creating advantages for your firm at a rate faster than competition. Because one of the greatest advantages that programmable technology layers delivers is time and what you can do with that time. And in the end, the more we can transform firms to achieve better and more differentiated experiences, as evidenced in part by financial or business metrics, that is the essence of what pillar number 3, customer intelligence, is all about. That's what strategic CX is all about.
Thanks so much, Luke. It was really great to have you here today. And thanks to all of you for joining, and make sure to tune in for the rest of Experience Week for more great content.